6 injuries suffered by Jim Caviezel during filming. Number 1. Struck by lightning. Although several movies on Jesus Christ have been made, few have carried the great impact of the crucifixion like the Passion of Christ. Behind the cameras, the set was plagued by intense challenges. Some say spiritual warfare. Even though Jim's journey began as a calling, it soon became a physical and spiritual trial. Let's start with one of the most shocking moments. Literally struck by lightning. Being struck by lightning is rare, but being struck while portraying Jesus in one of the most profound and controversial films of all time? That's the kind of moment that sends chills down your spine. The scene being filmed was the Sermon on the Mount. Jim was delivering the iconic message, "Love your enemies," in Aramaic. The air was heavy with tension, not just because of the emotional weight of the scene, but because of the ominous weather rolling in. Lightning struck without warning. The bolt hit him directly, coursing through his body. Jim described it as being lit up like a Christmas tree. "I knew it was going to hit me," Jim recalled in an interview. "About 4 seconds before it happened, I could feel it. And when it hit, I felt this tremendous slap on my ears, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Fire shot out from both sides of my head, and the extras around me fell to the ground in shock. It was as if the heavens were trying to send us a message," said one crew member. 3 lightning strikes in one production? That's no coincidence. Some saw these events as a freak accident. Others, including Jim, believed there was a deeper meaning. He described the lightning strike as both a physical and spiritual wake-up call. "We were making a film about the most important story ever told," Jim said. "It's no surprise there were forces trying to stop us." The storm wasn't just in the sky, it was spiritual. But instead of being discouraged, they leaned into their faith, praying daily for strength and protection. The event also caused visible changes. Crew members recalled his hair standing on end, as if he had just walked out of a cartoon. Mel Gibson was yelling, "What happened to his hair?" Jim joked. "I looked like I had gone to Don King's hairstylist." While the lightning strike was an incredible moment, it was only the beginning of Jim's physical trials. Next, we'll explore how a single mistake during filming led to a level of pain he never expected. Injury 2. Flogged during the scourging scene. When you think of the crucifixion story, the scourging at the pillar often comes to mind as one of the most brutal and heart-wrenching moments. Unfortunately, the pain Jim experienced wasn't just acting. It was very real. To achieve authenticity, the filmmakers opted for real whips rather than fake ones. The scene required actors playing Roman soldiers to use these whips to strike a post behind Jim. But not everything went according to plan. In one of the takes, a Roman soldier actor misjudged his aim. Instead of the whip hitting the wooden post, it wrapped around Jim's back, striking him directly. "The pain was excruciating," Jim recalled. "It felt like someone had taken a branding iron and pressed it against my skin. I couldn't breathe, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out." You know what's crazy? This wasn't a one-time accident. In another take, the same mistake happened again. This time, the whip struck with even more force, leaving a deep welt across Jim's side. "It was as if God was allowing me to feel just a small fraction of what Christ experienced," Jim later said. "I knew I had to keep going, no matter how much it hurt." One crew member recalled, "You could feel the heaviness in the air. It wasn't just Jim who was affected. It was all of us. Many of us cried while watching the monitor, knowing this was only a fraction of what Christ went through." While modern medicine was available to treat his injuries, the pain lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Jim later reflected, It gave me a deeper appreciation for what Jesus endured. He didn't have the luxury of medical care or rest. He kept going because of his love for us. Can you imagine the pain Jesus went through? Just before he was crucified, Jesus was whipped by the Romans. John 19. The Bible doesn't say exactly how many lashes Jesus got. In Deuteronomy 25, it says, a criminal shouldn't get more than 40 lashes. Pontius Pilate ordered Jesus to be flogged. Matthew 27. He wasn't supposed to die from the flogging. The plan was for him to die by crucifixion after the whipping. Jesus willingly took our punishment. God the Father chose to send Jesus to die for us. Together they planned to save everyone who would believe. Jesus' painful wounds show how serious our sins are and how deep his love is for us. The scourging scene pushed Jim's body and spirit to the edge, but it was only one chapter of his ordeal. Next, we'll explore an even more dangerous moment. Injury number 3. The crown of thorns and migraine-inducing makeup. Portraying Jesus in the Passion of the Christ required more than physical endurance. For Jim, it also meant enduring long hours in the makeup chair to transform his appearance into a man beaten, bruised, and ultimately crucified for humanity's sins. But what seems like a routine part of filmmaking became one of the most grueling aspects of Jim's experience. Every morning, Jim arrived on set at 2 a.m. to begin the transformation process. For the next 8 hours, makeup artists meticulously applied layers of prosthetics, paint, and adhesives to his face and body. This included creating swollen wounds, cuts, and bruises that would appear lifelike on camera. The attention to detail was astounding. Individual strands of beard hair were glued onto his face to mimic a rugged, weathered Messiah. Blood effects were added to simulate the injuries Jesus endured during the scourging and crucifixion. Each strand, each cut, and each bruise was placed with precision. One of the most iconic elements of the transformation was the crown of thorns. While a real crown wasn't used for safety reasons, the replica was made from authentic materials, and wearing it was anything but comfortable. The crown pressed against Jim's head for hours during filming, causing discomfort and contributing to the strain he endured. The fake blood used to simulate wounds often ran into his eyes, making it difficult to see and adding to his physical challenges. As Jim sat in the chair each morning, he often thought of Isaiah 53, which describes Jesus as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. The makeup process gave him a small taste of the physical and emotional pain Jesus must have endured. Every stroke of the brush, every drop of fake blood reminded me of what he went through for us. Jim said, "It was humbling beyond words." After Jesus went through unfair trials and was whipped, but before he was put on the cross, the Roman soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. Matthew 27. The crown of thorns was not just painful, it was meant to make fun of him. They were mocking Jesus as the King of the Jews by hitting him, spitting on him, and saying mean things. Instead of using a real crown to show royalty, they used the thorns to make it hurt and to insult him. For Christians, the crown of thorns reminds us that Jesus is truly a king. One day, everyone in the whole universe will bow down to him as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Revelation 19. The Roman soldiers thought they were making fun of Jesus, but they were showing something true about him. Jesus came first as a suffering servant, Isaiah 53, and will come again as a conquering king and Messiah. Jesus chose to go through all that pain, shame, and mocking for us. The crown of thorns and all the suffering are now over. Jesus has received the crown he deserves. But we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that, by the grace of God, he might taste death for everyone. Hebrews 2. The crown of thorns has a deeper meaning. When Adam and Eve sinned, they brought evil and a curse into the world. Part of that curse was, "Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you." The Roman soldiers didn't realize it, but when they made the crown of thorns, they used something from the curse and put it on the head of the one who came to free us from that curse. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, "Cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree." Galatians 3. Jesus, through his perfect sacrifice, freed us from the curse of sin, and the thorn is a picture of that curse. Even though the soldiers meant it as a way to make fun of him, the crown of thorns was actually the perfect symbol of who Jesus is and what he came to do. The migraines and discomfort from the makeup process were just the beginning of Jim's trials on set. What came next would challenge his physical endurance even further, as he carried the immense weight of the cross itself. Injury 4. Dislocated shoulder from the cross. Few moments into the Passion of the Christ are as memorable as Jesus carrying the cross on his way to Golgotha. For Jim, this was one of the most physically demanding scenes in the film, an experience that left him with a dislocated shoulder and a deeper understanding of the weight Jesus bore for humanity. In Hollywood, props are often made from lightweight materials to ease the burden on actors. But Mel Gibson had a different vision for this scene. He insisted on using a real wooden cross, weighing a staggering 150 pounds, to achieve authenticity. Jim trained extensively to prepare for this scene, but no amount of training could fully prepare him for the physical toll of carrying such a heavy object across uneven terrain. The scene required Jim to fall under the weight of the cross repeatedly, mimicking Jesus' collapse on the way to Calvary. During one of these takes, something went horribly wrong. A Roman soldier actor was supposed to catch the cross as Jim fell to the ground, but he missed his cue. The full weight of the 150-pound cross came crashing down on Jim, driving his shoulder into the dirt with such force that it dislocated. "I heard a pop and immediately knew something was wrong," Jim said. "The pain was so intense that I couldn't move my arm. But we were in the middle of a take, and I didn't want to stop." Jim's dislocated shoulder was a serious injury, but instead of halting production, he chose to push through. For the remainder of the day, he carried the cross, with one arm hanging limp, the pain etched into his face, adding an unintentional layer of realism to the performance. "Every step was agony," Jim recalled. "But I kept thinking, if Jesus didn't quit, I can't quit either." As if carrying a massive wooden cross wasn't challenging enough, the scene was filmed on a precarious cliffside with strong winds. Jim recalled the danger vividly. The cross was swaying back and forth in the wind. At one point I thought, if this thing snaps, I'm going over the edge. The wind was so strong that the cross nearly toppled over multiple times. I was shouting at the crew, "You obviously don't care about my safety," Jim joked. But despite the risks, he pressed on, determined to complete the scene. After the take that dislocated his shoulder, Jim received medical attention, but he refused to stop filming. Over the next few days, he continued to carry the cross, his shoulder heavily strapped to prevent further injury. The pain was constant, but it only added to the raw emotion captured on screen. Imagine Jesus. Think about the pain he felt with every hit of the hammer, driving the nails deeper. Can you even imagine that pain? After that, they raised the cross and dropped it into a hole in the ground. At that moment, as Psalm 22:14 says, all of his bones came out of joint. That's when the real suffering began. Jesus hung there for everyone to see, in front of the very people he had created. To make things worse, the thieves being crucified next to him mocked him. So did the religious leaders and the crowd that had gathered. Breathing on the cross was almost impossible. Jesus had to push his body up to breathe out and lower it to breathe in. Each time, his torn back scraped against the rough wood of the cross. The pain was unbearable. The dislocated shoulder was one of the most challenging injuries Jim faced during filming. But it wasn't the last.